it's okay to actually know what that is for you. Actually, the more you know what that is for you, the faster you can not waste time on that kind of stuff, and the better it will be for you in your career. And I think what tends to happen, especially for women, is we want to please everybody. And so we're going to try our best all the time in everything. And there's nothing wrong with that. But you do get to a point where you're like, no, I'm really good here, but I'm not good here. And so I'm not going to waste time over here because I'm not good there. And own that and sit in it and be okay with it.
Hey, Nicole, what do you get when a former corporate CEO and a do-gooding executive walk into a recording studio?
Well, Aaron, nothing, because the two of us are usually on my couch or Zoom, because wine.
You get a podcast created for Gen X women who are bought into the corporate world, but fed up with the BS.
I know. It's how to thrive the 9 to 5 or 6 or 7.
It's career therapy. It's comedy. It's definitely full-on authenticity. Basically, we give you tangible strategies to rise in your career without compromising everything else.
Because work doesn't have to suck.
Hey guys, Erin here with another amazing podcast interview. Oh my gosh. So a lot of times I know the guests before I interview them. Well, maybe about 50-50, but in this instance, Stephanie Chung was introduced to me by another woman who I guested on her podcast, and I'd asked for recommendations. And my day was just made, my life was just made so much better by getting to interview her. And I can't wait to share it with you. And I'm also going to share, after I share kind of the key highlights, like how it helped me personally, because I was not having a great day. And we talk about it briefly. But first, I want to introduce her. Stephanie Chung, she blazed trails in the aviation industry, and she was the first African-American to be at the helm. She was president of a private jet company, Jet Suite. And her rise there started, spoiler alert, from working like handling and the counter, et cetera. So she started from quote unquote the bottom. And now she's an author, she's a keynote speaker, she's a board member, she's been published a million places. She is just a badass and a total light. And you're going to hear things like the time she tried to say no thank you to a big girl job and what transpired from that. We'll talk about the two powerful lessons that she learned from her father. And she'll tell us stories about how she put those into action. She also talked about, those annoying little bombs, quote unquote, that executives throw our way. And most of us, including me, react with like disdain or anxiety or whatever. She really shows how to absorb those and how formative and helpful they can be. And I love the example of the story she tells. She also talks about the unique way that she handled a time when her team messed up, and the boss, it was a big mess up, and the boss was sort of like, give me a name, was like, quote unquote, hunting for them, and how she handled that. And then she has this ally leadership she talks about, but ally, ALLY, is an acronym and a sort of a process. And it's very simple, but very powerful. And she's going to talk about what that stands for and practical ways you can use it to be a legacy leader. And I hope that it transforms you beyond, quote unquote, the boardroom or the workplace. So for me, talk about it briefly, but my son had a really tough day, and he's had a tough 6-9 months, with he's an 8th grade boy. It's crazy. How many people I talk to and find out I'm not alone. And he had a bad day. And just one simple phrase that she said in our interview completely transformed how I handled that situation at the end of the day and really helped us get through it. And even though it was the worst day ever for him, quote unquote, we had the best conversation we've had in a long time. And a big part of that was just learning from Stephanie and talking with her on record and as well as off record. And so, gosh, I cannot wait to share her beauty, her energy, her authenticity, her badassery with you. So without further ado, here's my interview with Stephanie. So first of all, just to cap off, thank you. For our listeners, we actually came onto this call 7 minutes before it. I got a tough text from my son, and Stephanie's already, counseled me and given me advice and pulled me up. And I just love her character. And I'm so excited to talk to you because you are like the perfect guest for our listeners. And here's why. Most of our listeners are in corporate America. They're in sort of the traditional 9 to 5, and we're trying to give them new ways of thinking about things, to buck the norm, to lead more authentically. And having somebody like you who is both has done that, is continuing to do that, but also is very seasoned in speaking. You've written a book, like you have, I hate to say it, you kind of have your shit together and like how to package it, girl. So I want to start here. One of the things we have in common was we both said, quote unquote, no thank you to one of our first big executive jobs. Can you tell us the story about the time you tried to say no thank you?
Well, gosh, I'm trying to think. I did try to say it. And then one of my colleagues, not even a colleague, just a friend of mine was like, she got in my face a little bit. She's like, whoa, 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 whoa. Wait, you're telling me that if you took this job, it's going to make you be the first person ever in history to, first Black person ever in history to do this particular role. And I was like, yeah. And she's like, you need to suck it up and take one for the team, right?
For a week. You for a week.
We don't really care, right? So, but what I think is really important, especially for your listeners, is not every, I would say I used to lead sales teams, and I would say this all the time. Not every customer is a good customer, right? Not every job is a good job for you. Not every boss is a great boss for you, right? So you just really have to know who you are, what gifts and talents you have, what you bring to the table, know where your superpowers are, and then be okay with knowing where you're not good. Like, I suck in this area, and no matter how hard I try, I can spend all day, night, and weekends trying to get better at it, and I'm still going to be below average. Everybody has that. And so it's okay to actually know what that is for you. Actually, the more you know what that is for you, the faster you can not waste time on that kind of stuff, and the better it will be for you in your career. And I think what tends to happen, especially for women, is we want to please everybody. And so we're going to try our best all the time in everything. And there's nothing wrong with that. But you do get to a point where you're like, no, I'm really good here, but I'm not good here. And so I'm not going to waste time over here because I'm not good there. And own that and sit in it and be okay with it, because that's actually incredibly powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay. So tell us the story about, though, you're sitting in, is Dallas? You're in Texas.
Yeah, I'm in Dallas.
You're in, I forget what you call it, the
fiery furnace.
Fiery furnace.
Yeah, I'm in the fiery furnace. So basically what happened is, just for your listeners who haven't read the book, and thank you for this is one of the stories in the book. So I had come down, and I think anybody who's ever worked in corporate, you totally get this. I was leading a sales team at the time. And so the team, our headquarters was in Dallas, but none of us were based in Dallas. And so we'd come to Dallas to have some meeting. But because I didn't want to be in headquarters, because you get in headquarters and then, your time's all over the place, right? So I decided to have a meeting with my team at a hotel in Dallas, but not at headquarters. So we were just kind of slide in, knock out our agenda, and then slide out, right? Everybody go back to their home bases. Well, I get a call from the CEO, his assistant, and she was like, hey, Steph, are you in Dallas right now? Now, I don't know how she even knew I was in Dallas, because we were so mindful. So make sure nobody did it. So I'm on the phone like, I was like, yeah, I'm in Dallas, but I'm leaving tonight, right? And she didn't even ask, she didn't care. And she's like, well, great. And I'll change the names to protect everybody. So let's just say his name was Jack. She goes, Jack, the CEO. Jack wants to see you in the office tomorrow at 7:30. What? And then she hung up. And so at this point, I'm with my team. We're actually walking to a restaurant to go have drinks because we've done with the meeting all day. And so the team's like, so you're called into the CEO's office? And I was like, yeah. And they're like, for what? I said, I don't know. I don't even know how she knew we were here, right? So my mind is whirling like, this cannot be good. So, and my mind is also whirling from a vein perspective, really close. Like, I'm supposed to be in and out of town that same day. I don't have a suitcase. I don't have a toothbrush. Like, I got no makeup. I have nothing, right? So now I have to spend the night. I'm sleeping in the bed, the hotel. I grab a hotel room. I'm sleeping in it like I'm in a casket, right? No, I can't mess up my makeup. I can't mess up my hair. I've got like no clean underwear, like the whole thing, right? So I remember getting up the next morning and I, borrowed a toothbrush from the hotel amenity kit or whatever, kind of pull myself together. I get into the office and I don't know why I'm having this meeting. And this particular CEO of mine, I always say he was big in size and big in stature, right? It was just like he used to play football when he was in college. So he's a very big man. And I didn't really know him that well. Like he was the CEO, but I worked in a different division. And so I knew him, but not really that well. So I go into his office and he's like, Stephanie, it's really nice to meet you. Thank you for coming in. And he says, I've heard really great things about you. And so I'm like, okay, I'm thinking this is starting out good, right?
Right. It's nothing. Yeah, fire me up there. Don't open any stand. Run quick.
And so he's like, listen, I need you to come move to Dallas and take over this team. And I was like, wait, what? Because at the time, my team, I lived in a different state and my team was all over the place and I was in a different division. And so I just remember sitting there and he's like, this team, hasn't hit their number. The team's dysfunctional. And he's telling me all the issues with this team, which is really, when you think about it, why would I want to take over a team like that? Like, I'm good. Thank you.
Yeah. Yep. Thank you, Nick.
Thank you. Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
So as we're having this meeting and he's going through all the problems that he's having with his team, he says, I need you to come over here and do what you did with your current team. Now, the current team I had been with 5 years, that team was humming. They were thick and bud on all cylinders. And so I want you to come over here and do this. And so as he's sitting there, and I'm thinking, first of all, I don't want to move to Texas. It's too hot, right? Secondly, I don't want to be at headquarters. I mean, we just went through this. I didn't even come to headquarters. Right. And so there's no way I'm taking this job is what I'm thinking in my head, but I have to figure out how to say this to the CEO who I've just met and spent time with. And so I was like, I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. And, and I, in a nice way, was like, I'm good. I love where I'm at, love the team I have, and I appreciate the offer, but, no, thank you. And then he turned on a dime, right? And so all of a sudden now it went from, I'd like you to like, Steph, he literally said to me, cut the shit. I expect you to be in Dallas in the next 30 days. I'll see you here. So and then his assistant came and was like, okay, see you later, Steph, see you in 30 days, and kind of scooted me out the office. And I remember just sitting there thinking, I don't want this job. Yeah. And I appreciate him thinking I could do the job, right? It wasn't a matter of could I do the job. I just didn't want all that baggage that I knew was going to have to happen. But I took the job because I didn't really feel like I had a choice. And then, you know what? That same year, that team had never hit their goal. They hit the goal that first year under my leadership. And so the rest is history from there. But it was, yeah, I said no. And the no was like, didn't even exist. He just said, cut this. I want you here in, 30 days. I was like,
oh. Right. And of course, the lesson isn't like somebody tells you with authority to do something, do it. But I think what I love is you have several stories, and we'll get to those, about times when your boss was a little bit of a bully. And I think most people would bitch, moan, call in a corner, and you saw the good part of that. But before we do that, I just want to let people know, like, they're probably like, oh, of course she sounds like a badass. Of course she was offered this job. Like, tell us where you started in the aviation space.
Yeah, I actually started off loading luggage and parking planes at the Boston Logan Airport. And that in aviation is, I loved that job. It was like a super fun job. But back in the day, this was like 40 years ago, women were not working on the ramp. We weren't usually women were more flight attendants or, doing customer service or something. So I was one of a few women that worked on the ramp, parking planes and whatnot. But here's what's really interesting is that I was a military child. I grew up, my dad was a Master Sergeant in the U.S. Air Force. So I grew up around soldiers my whole life. So I'm actually quite comfortable being around men. Yeah, because I was primarily growing up around men all the time. So for me to have a job that was typically held by men didn't really faze me at all. I like I said, I loved the job and had a lot of fun at it and was really good at it. But then what would happen is I would then go work upstairs in customer service to make extra money and overtime pay. And it was while I was up there that one of the VPs came, was flying into the airport. And he said to me, he says, Steph, every time I come to this airport, I see you. I see you with a smile on your face, checking customers in. I think we have you in the wrong position. I think you should be in sales. And then that's what really redirected my career, because up until that point, I was going to go down the operations route. And I didn't really know this gentleman that well, but I respected him. He was one of our executives. And so I was like, okay, he must see something in me that I didn't necessarily see or even know to see. I didn't even know what the salespeople did. But then from there, I moved into sales in the airlines and sold. And then from there, got recruited into private aviation and ran a company. And, the rest is history from there. So
That's amazing. Well, I don't want to go too far without talking about Ally, which is a word, but it's also an acronym that you use, Ally Leadership. It's in the title of your book, which I introduced at the beginning. First, just tell us what that stands for. And what that
So
means
Ally,
to you.
you're right, is an acronym, and it stands for Ask, Listen, Learn, You Take Action. And the reason why that was important for me with the book is because when you think about the word ally, right? I could have named the book Allyship, right? But I didn't. I called it Ally Leadership: How to Lead People Who Are Not Like You. And the reason is because it's a leadership book. It's all about, if you ask, you listen, you learn, you must take action, right? And that's the biggest piece. It does us no good if you just ask, listen, and learn, and then
Yeah.
you don't act, right? So we need you to take action. But that's what the acronym stands for, is Ally, Ask, Listen, Learn. And every leader should be really focused on asking, listening, learning, and then taking action where they can.
So here's my big question around that and just good leadership in general. Most people, you're not going to find anyone that says, nope, we shouldn't do that.
Right.
But you're also not going to find many people that do. What are the one or two barriers, whether it's their own personal or other, that hold people back from leading like an ally or just even being a decent leader?
Yeah, what I find is most leaders don't want to make a mistake. They're so afraid of being canceled or making a mistake or looking like they don't have all the answers that that fear kind of locks them in place, and then they do nothing. And that's the bigger issue, right? And what I want leaders to know, and one of the reasons I wrote the book is, listen, you've read the book. The book is packed full of stories of where I maybe hit it out the park, and then maybe where I dramatically missed it. And then everything in between. So I'm showing just through my own career, my own life, how I did do it well and I did not do it well at times. And so the reason I do that is because I want leaders to realize that this is a long game play, right? And it's okay if you don't hit it out the park or you make mistakes. All that's okay. Actually, if you're doing it right, you will make mistakes because these are people that are not like you, right? But I don't want them to feel like this is this big, overly complicated situation, like, that you need a degree from MIT to figure it out. You don't. If you watch your typical 5-year-old, they're figuring out every day. They're asking, they're listening, they're learning, and then they're taking action. Hey, you want to be my friend? I'm going to be your friend. It's super simple, right? Yeah. So I don't want leaders to think this is an overly complicated situation. It really isn't. You can make it complicated, which is what tends to happen. But here's the thing about becoming an ally for folks is it's a head and heart issue. And a lot of times we just think of it as a head issue, right? Check the box, you hit the numbers, whatever. And I want people to realize it's a head and heart issue. So your heart part of it is if you're talking to someone who's not like you, and I'll use me as an example. I'm a double minority, right? I'm a woman and a person of color. My superpower is being able to sense where you're coming from when you're talking to me, right? And I think that's true for any of us who fall into any kind of category. We just can tell by your tone, right? So you may be saying the right things, but if your body language and your tone isn't adding up, we just know that something's off here. So knowing that if you come in with the heart issue of the right intention, people are going to notice that as well. And we're going to give you a little bit of grace because you may not have used maybe the right vocabulary or the right words or whatever because you just didn't know. And so that then people will think, oh, okay, well, they just didn't know. And so not a big deal. And so that's where the head of heart issue comes in. But because most people I'd rather you talk to me and actually maybe not have all the words down to a science with the right intention than to not talk to me at all, right? Because you're so afraid that you may offend me. I'd rather you take the risk and just like, let's have an open conversation if you're just trying to get to know me than to not have a conversation with me at all because you're afraid of what you might possibly say. Does that
Yeah,
make sense?
it does. And I think the fear thing, I think you're absolutely right. There's fears of being imperfect. There's fears of losing their job because some micro thing instead of playing the macro long game. Your father gave you a couple pieces of advice, like two pillars that I think shape a lot of this. What were those?
Yeah, when I got my first leadership job, I remember talking to my father, and again, as I mentioned, he was in the military, and so I was like, "Dad, I just got promoted. I really want to do a good job. What would be two pieces of leadership advice you would give me?" And he said, "One, always protect your team, and two, always know there's two sides to every story." And I still lead that
Mm,
way to today. Now, obviously, he's in the military. He was in the Vietnam War. So when he says protect your team, he means it literally. It's, and I can respect that because that's how the military functions, right? But the second part about knowing there's two sides to every story, this is the part that I was surprised how important that was, right? You just kind of think, oh,
mhm,
yeah, I know there's two sides of every story. But every team that I've ever led, Erin, I will tell you, and they would tell you, Stephanie's biggest pet peeve, do not have a problem with somebody on the team
mm,
and then come and talk to her about it.
mhm.
Like, I don't wanna hear it. Unless you've talked to that person, you don't have the right to come talk to me about it, right? So, I expect that the team functions like a team. So, if you have a problem with your, your brother or your sister over there, have that conversation. If you 2 can't figure it out, then the 2 of you can come talk to me about it, and then the 3 of us can help figure it out. But that's how you get a team to actually work as a team and have each other's back. And so, because a house divided never wins, right? So you've always got to instill that. And as a leader, for me, that's always the first conversation I have with any team I take over.
Mm,
First conversation is,
love it.
here's who I am. Here's, my work ethic or my work philosophy, blah, blah, blah. Whatever it is I need to talk about with the team. And then I say two things. One, on this team, you are your brother and sister's keeper, right? We're either going to all win together or we're going to all lose together. This is completely our choice.
Love
So
it.
that way, when I set the tone, everybody realizes like, oh, okay, like, yeah, I need to care about what you're doing and what you're doing. And I need to communicate what I'm doing and so on and so forth. When you start creating an environment like that, then all of a sudden you have a team that's unstoppable. And so
Yeah.
one of the ways that I also would do that on a bigger level when I was running companies is to have the company do a walk a mile. So now all of a sudden, if this is your job, then I'm going to now create an environment where no matter what your job is, you're going to walk a mile in somebody else's job, and
Mhm.
that walk a mile so that you understand how the business works, right? Not just how your piece of the business works, but how does the business work? Because we're a team and we're all going to win or we're going to all lose, right?
Yeah.
And so I'll give you an example. When one of the companies that I ran, it's an aviation company. So yeah, pilots are your biggest workforce for the most part. So whenever the pilots would come in for the recurrent training, right, how to do something with plane, I would also make them come into headquarters and spend time with maybe the customer service person. You put some headphones on and you listen how they got to book these trips because it's not just about you getting in the plane and flying it. It's about all the steps that have to happen behind the scenes to be able to set you up to be able to get in the plane and just fly it, right?
Yeah.
So if you understand all of those pieces, now we can actually work better because you are now part of the team. It's not just, oh, so and so didn't give me this, manifest. It's like, no, well, wait a minute. So why don't I have that? And what could I do? So it changes the dynamics of the company when the left hand knows what the right hand's doing. And together we all know why we're here and what it is that we're trying to get accomplished.
Yeah. You know what I love listening to you about this is I think so many people obviously complicate leadership. And one of the things I'm hoping listeners maybe also hear is that sometimes just having a couple of principles that are your own, that you believe in, like yours were sort of rooted with your father, but you believed in them, less is sometimes more. And having them be sincere, not just, word vomit. Like you obviously brought these to life. You didn't just come to one meeting and say, protect your
Right.
sisters and brothers or don't bring, there's two sides to the
Yeah.
story, whatever. There was substance, there was, to your point, there was action, and you took action in the why. Um, yeah, and I hope leaders, listening to this, it doesn't mean you're two or three like main principles need to be the same ones as Stephanie's or your boss's, but like stand for something, right? It's the whole Hamilton, if you think of Hamilton, if you don't stand for an eight thing, what do you stand for or whatever. The other, so that I love those two principles. My head's swirling because I had a situation where quite frankly, my CTO and sort of my COO constantly where it was that one was coming to me, then the other one was, and it took me at least a year, if not longer, to finally come to the conclusion this would never be solved. That I'd be dumber than you. Like, I would try to resolve it with one, and then I finally was like, and I literally actually the tough love I gave when I told the CTO that the COO is your customer. And so instead of having it be a tie, I was like, there's a hierarchy here. And what she's asking for from you, we all have customers. Yours just happens to be internal. It happens to be our COO while I'm dealing with our external customers. Hey guys, Erin here. Stop. Do not do it. Don't fast forward. I have something too important. I have a couple of very passive aggressive questions to ask you that you don't want to miss. Here they are. 1, do you find yourself often comparing yourself to others? Like, they work harder than me, they get noticed more than me, they have better luck than me, they're smarter than me. Or do you also just feel exhausted from having to always work as hard, if not harder, than everybody else to stand out and succeed? I know you have these challenges. We all do. And this is why I wrote the 50% rule. And I know you need to read another book like you need a hole in the head. But I'm telling you, this book and this rule, I'm obsessed with it. And it has changed my life. It has changed the lives of others around us. And it has also been the formula for success behind so many successful people. Savannah Bananas, Hamilton, Weird Al Yankovic. The 50% rule is the simplest shortcut to stop comparing, stop copying, stop chasing other people, and literally compete in your league of your own. There isn't a day that doesn't go by where I stop myself and I'm like, oh, she did a talk that I wish I could do. She's got more. No, it doesn't matter because we don't compete in the same league. I compete in a league of my own because I am constantly 50% ruling things. So if you're interested in this concept, which by the way is more fun as a team sport, but at least start with yourself. You cannot miss this book. It's not only powerful, it's really freaking fun to read. That is always my number one goal. It was my number one goal with my first book. It's my number one goal with the 50% rule. I want to make it enjoyable to read it. Why? So that you read it. So if you feel like you are stuck with these comparison cramps or just all the symptoms that I talk about in the book of sleep running syndrome, self-doubt gout, and pioneer paralysis, and you have to read the book to find out more, then just go buy the darn book. Easiest way, go to Amazon, search the 50% rule, and I cannot wait to hear how you 50% rule things. I want to go back to the protecting your team. One of my favorite stories I've heard you tell was about the time that you protected your employee. I'm sure there's a million stories. But there's a story about a time when things got a little bit messed up and your boss was looking for a head to chop.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Tell us about that.
Yeah. So in private aviation, the numbers are big, right? And so what happened is one of my salespeople, my rule was really simple. If you're a sales director and you're catching a flight and you've got to get a sales proposal out, no problem. You can have your sales support person do it. However, before they push it to the prospect or the customer, you need to double check the numbers as well, right? That was just the basic rule. And everybody understood it. So this particular day, what happened, unfortunately, is the salesperson was, running for a flight. The sales support person created this proposal. The numbers were off. They sent the proposal to the prospect, and it was a $325,000 mistake. Okay.
Oops. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And the prospect was holding our feet to the fire. Right. I have a proposal, so you got to honor this and commit to it. And so word quickly spread about this because, as you could imagine, finance was like, what's going on? And so the CEO is livid. And he calls me into the office, and he, rightfully so, is just so mad. And I remember him asking me, Who did this? Now, my father's words rang in my head, always protect your team. And so I remember standing there and I said to him, I did it. As far as you're concerned, I did it. And you would think that, like, people think, oh, it's very noble of you. It just made him madder. So it's like it was not, it got really ugly really quick. And I remember standing there watching him as he's screaming, his veins are like popping out. He's turning bright red. And I'm thinking, oh my God, like this guy is either he's getting ready to jump across the table and grab me in my throat or something. It was not a pretty scene. But as I stood there, because he's demanding a name, and he says, I know that you don't do proposals. You know, you're the head of the department. Like, you don't do a proposal. Tell me who did this? And I said, on my team, we have process. Process wasn't followed. So as far as you're concerned, I did it. I'll handle it. But you don't need to know the name. It's a moot point. I mean, we are where we are now. Right now, we're trying to figure out how to get out of this. And so that was an example of I could have easily, trust me, I was as mad as he was, right? I could have easily threw this guy under the bus and he would have had it coming to him, right? But it wasn't the right thing to do. And I guess my point really for everybody listening is leadership is hard, but it's hard, right? There are times that you're going to have to make those tough decisions, or there are times that you're going to have to take the bullet for the team, and that's leadership. Right.
Yeah.
And so that was one of those moments that, when I say we're protecting each other and we're each other's keeper, well, I had to live it as well. I couldn't just say it. Right. I had to also live it. Now, what was interesting is you can imagine the dynamics that did for the team, because the team knew all of this. Everybody knew, like, oh, my God, this is a big mistake. But they watched their boss take the hit for it. So I wasn't just saying stuff. I was practicing what I preached.
Demonstrating. Yep.
Exactly. And that made the team even closer, right? And that's what you're looking for as a leader. So, you don't just want to be a leader when times are good and everything's rainbow and unicorns. You're the leader when times are good, bad, or indifferent. That's leadership, right? And that's the difference between bosses, managers, and leaders. So,
well, and I think in that situation, in the short term, that boss that was demanding the name was pissed at you, right? Like, because you were defying. I think there's so many times where there is a short term, anger and hit. But I can almost guarantee you that long term, when that same boss was thinking about who is the leader that I want to put into the, next role, or who do I want to rate at the top or give the bigger bonus to, like, once that had settled down, the nobleness of what you did as a leader, I'm sure was something he or she actually respected, right? And I think so many people worry about that short term. Oh, I'm going to go against what they say or defy or whatever. And yeah, in the short term, they're natural. Like, I don't like anybody telling me no.
That's right.
Right? Like, that's happening. Right. But in the long term, and when I say long term, that could be a day, it could be a month, it could, that long. There's a level of respect, because that's what we need in those leaders, so
100%.
That's really important that you held your ground there.
Thank you for saying that. And you're right. I mean, that leader and I, that CEO and I is still very close. He's probably one of the folks I would say is probably one of the better CEOs I've ever worked for. And, but what's really interesting is you're right. Every day you're building your personal brand. And so you have to decide what that brand is. What does it stand for? And especially for your listeners who are moving up in their career, you have a brand. Now, it's really important that you determine what that brand represents, because when decisions are being made, to your point, for, promotions or new projects or who do we send overseas or anything like that, you won't be in the room when those decisions are being made, but your brand will certainly be in the room and it will be discussed. And so the question is, how do you want it to be discussed? And that's what you're working towards every single day.
That's right. That's all right. That long-term vision, that big picture, I think is so good. One of the things you mentioned that, you got a lot of bombs thrown at you, right? Like, and anybody listening, we all know that part of the reason some of us don't necessarily want or have said no thank you, at least, or fear the bigger jobs are those bombs. Like, they seem to get bigger as you go up the chain. But you told a story about a time when you were thrown sort of a bomb, and you saw the good in it. And maybe it wasn't immediate. Maybe it was long term. Can you tell a story about
which one are we talking about? He knows. I was thinking about that. I'm like, I don't know if he knows which girl. I got bombs all over the place. But I did make a note.
Your boss came in and asked you how many pilots called out today.
Oh, yes. That was that same CEO.
Which was a glitter bomb. It's like that, right? It's hidden, like it doesn't feel like a bomb, but there was.
That's right. Exactly. That was a really good one. So basically, I'll set the stage for your listeners. What happened is I was having a horrible day. And I was at the time head of sales, and it was the end of the month. Sales deals were not coming through. Different things were getting delayed. And so my team was just working really hard and grinding it out. And so I went in to grab a cup of coffee, and he happened to be in there as well, getting some coffee. And so he's like, "Hey, Steph, how's your day going?" I'm like, we're trying to hit the number. We're going to come in close, but not really sure. We've got a couple of deals that have gone off the rails. And so I'm just kind of sharing everything with them. He's like, "Oh wow, hang in there. I know you guys got this." And then he says, so out of the blue, he goes, "How many pilots have called in sick today?" And mind you, I was head of sales. I didn't know how many pilots. That's operation. So I was like, and quite frankly, the day I was having, I didn't know, and I didn't care, right? I was just like, so I'm looking at him, and for a second, I thought, well, maybe he's like confused and thinking I'm the
Right, somebody else.
Right, exactly. So I was like, oh, and I just nonchalantly was like, no, I don't know, but if you want, I go find out, like that, right?
Yeah.
And he looked at me, and then he said, "How do you not know this?" Now, there's a part of me that wanted to say, "Did you not just hear everything I just talked about?" But of course, I didn't do that because you got to be respectful. So I was like, "Well, what do you mean? I don't watch the pilot stats. I'm not overseeing the pilots." And he said, "Yeah, but you oversee sales." And he says, "So if there's no pilots to fly the planes, doesn't that affect your sales? If there's pilots calling out sick and now the flights are delayed, doesn't that affect your sale?" And so now he's just rattling off all kinds of stuff, right? And what I quickly started to realize was he's right. Like, I should know that, right? And so I remember getting that tongue lashing. And then at that point, but because I wasn't responsible for the pilots, but I was on the executive team. And so I should know what those stats were. So I remember leaving the coffee, grab my coffee, going downstairs to operations. I'm like, "How many pilots were calling sick?" And they're like, "What do you care, right?" So I'm thinking, normally I wouldn't care, but I care today, And so we're having the discussion, me and the head of operations. But what the lesson there was for me, and I actually then when I started to run companies, started to do the same thing to all my leaders as well, which is the left hand has to know what the right hand's doing. We have to understand, how does this business work? Not just how your one piece of the business works, but how does the whole thing work? Especially when you get to that executive level, right?
Yeah.
And so when I started to run companies, when I made a comment about, the left hand knows what the right hand's doing, the pilots sit with the customer service people, salespeople sit with finance people, everybody has to know what's going on. And I learned that from that CEO. That one time I don't know how many pilots have called out today. And he gave me such a lashing and education at the same time that it literally instantly changed how I led teams, companies, etc. So now I am that girl who's very much fixated on the leadership team. It has to I'm expecting you to know your portion of whatever it is you're responsible for, but I'm also expecting you to know the entire scope of what's going on within the business.
Yeah.
And that way you can actually, offer up some help, right? So when I sat down that incident and sat down with the operations person to find out what was going on with the pilots, as he was talking and sharing with me some of the challenges that he was dealing with, then as a sales leader, I could go, "Oh, wait, well, you know what? We could probably help you guys in this area if we just told customers in advance, make sure you have this, this, and this ready." You know what I mean? So now all of a sudden you're looking at different ways that you can add value beyond just bringing in the number, as the head of sales. So
Yeah, I love that. And for our listener, I mean, that's a great leadership quality, but holy Jesus, like if you're somebody, which is most everybody, that's, desires a promotion someday, like start paying attention to the shit you're not supposed to pay attention to.
Yep.
Like in a strategic way, right? Like, you
Yep.
can't know everything, but that executive also, those were the things they were looking at as well. And I bet a little bit of it too was, if this person thinks that they're going to move up the ladder, like I'm kind of giving them some Easter eggs of like, here are some of the things you need to think about, both in your job today, but if you want to take that next step. So I think that's a great challenge too for our listeners. How do you maybe read a report that makes no sense that you read, but it is, starting to demonstrate that you're ready for that next level. Whether it's
Right.
in the same discipline, it's you want to move from, finance to strategy, whatever it is, like start doing it
Yes.
now.
Yeah. And you know what's really interesting is, for sure, if you're a leader who wants to grow and continue on that path up towards the C-suite or in the C-suite, you do want to know what's keeping your C-suite up at night, right? You have
100%.
to know that. The second piece of it, especially if you work for a big company where there's an annual report that comes out or something, find that, read the CEO's letter to the shareholders, and that's going to tell you where he or she is focused for the year. And
Yep.
then you need to make that a focus of yours as well, right? Because what you're trying to do, especially as you're trying to move your career up, is you're trying to stand out.
Yep.
So people expect you to get the job done, right? That's no longer like, something magical. Like you have to produce the result. That's the non-starter. But now, in order to stand out in a very crowded, noisy space, well, how do you do that? Well, you know what the C-suite cares about.
Yep.
When you're communicating with them, you're talking in the language that they care about, right? And so you're having that discussion, and that by default is going to make you stand out because, going back to me not knowing what the pilots are doing. Just imagine if I did know.
Yeah.
Right. And he says, how many pilots have called in sick? And I go, oh, actually, say we've got 10 called in, but here's what operations is doing, blah, blah, blah. He'd be impressed. Right. That
100%.
became my language down the line, but I had to get jolted into it.
Yeah.
And so, for the sake of the conversation that you and I are having, people don't need to be jolted into it. If you want to move up your career and get into the C-suite, it's a dogfight, right? Because there's not that many positions up there. So you're going to have to stand out. And how you do that is to not just know the bare minimum or not just know your number or not just know your task. You need to know how does that fit into the overall scope of the business. What business are you in? How does the business make money? How does what you contribute bring to the table of what the business is doing? You do some basic understanding like that and know the information. When you're running into the C-suite at the cafe or coffee shop or whatever, you're not having a conversation that's like stuff they could care less about. You're having a conversation about stuff that they're actually always thinking about.
Yeah.
And now you're adding value because you're probably closer to the situation than they are, right? And so you're adding a different perspective that perhaps they hadn't really thought about. That's how you start to stand out in a very crowded space.
I love it. It's like I paid you. One of my sayings is stop outworking others, start out uniquing them. It's about the game is about standing out in a substantive way.
Hey there, it's Erin. I'm just popping in real quick to ask you a question. Is there any chance you know someone who is looking for a keynote speaker for their upcoming event? Look, I know that many event organizers, they struggle to find a speaker who provides both tangible value and business knowledge, but that also lights their audience on fire. And I truly believe there aren't many speakers like me out there who are both former corporate executives and professionally trained speakers. And there's definitely none that roll in with an orange suitcase they unpack with their audience. Trust me on that. I would love nothing more than to bring my message of using authenticity as your strategic career and business advantage to people spinning in your universe, especially if you'd be there. I promise my talks always create an immediate buzz, but not just right after, but for months and years after the event is over. You can learn more about my message, style, and reviews, and share my speaking info by going to beauthenticinc.com/keynote-speaking. That's B, just the letter B, authenticinc.com/keynote-speaking. Or of course, we have it right in the show notes to make it easy for you too.
Final two questions that we always ask. The first one is, what's your buck that story is what we call it. Buck that. Time that you bucked the norm and, went against the grain and good things happened.
Nice. So I would say it was probably one of my recent, roles that I had over the past few years ago. I was the chief growth officer for one of the private jet companies, and I was given hey, just come here and you can create whatever job you want, which was, I never had that before. Usually you come in to fill a role, right? But this particular CEO was like, hey, we just want you over here. So you create whatever job you want to do over here. And that was a great honor for me. And so I really sat and thought about what is it that I feel like I can add value. And at this stage of my career, it was all about how do I add more, legacy work and significance versus success. I'd already reached the success levels. And so what I decided to do was when I looked at the industry that I was in, I love private aviation, but I always say we suffer from PMS, right? We are pale, male, and stale. It's very much an industry where it's really catered to men. Whether you're marketing to men or people who are flying on the planes, it's just men, 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 men. And so I wanted to diversify that and divvy it up and shake up the industry a little bit. So what we decided, and I had the CEO's support. He was amazing, and he totally was on board. So he's like, run till apprehended. Fantastic. So how do we, get more people, more women, and more people of color, and just more people that, because we as an industry was only marketing towards white, high net worth men. That's all we were marketing towards. So how do we change that narrative? Because women at the time and even now, killing it, running their own businesses, opening up their own businesses. We could definitely have women go sign those contracts. They don't always have to. And up to this point, the marketing was, if you ever saw women on any of the marketing, you usually would think she was an assistant just because of how they placed her and all that stuff, right? So I wanted to change that narrative for women and people of color and, in any different group, right? So one of the things that I did is with the team that I have, we built a team, we built a department, and I was like, our job's going to shake it up. We're going to go and we're going to shake up this industry, and we're going to hope that our competitors follow suit, right? Because this is how we all win here. And so I'll just use women as an example. We did the industry's first diversity-focused photo shoot. And what that meant was I was like, everybody on set, from in front of the camera, behind the camera, everybody is going to be diverse. So we had a day where it was just a women photo shoot. We had a day where it was just people of color photo shoot, Black, Hispanic, Asian, you know what I mean? And so it was all because I first have to start with the marketing assets. If I want to diversify, I've got to at least start with the basics. People have to be able to see themselves in a brochure. Right. And so using the women one, I remember talking to the team and I was like, you know what, for this shoot, we don't have to have anybody on the plane. It's just the woman, because the message that sends is she's the boss. Right.
Yeah.
So instead of having it where, there's a bunch of people and we're going to put her, and we're not really sure she's the assistant. Who is she? Right. We're not going to have any of that confusion. Exactly. She's sitting in the main lead passenger seat. And she's got her stuff, and you can just tell by the whole footage and the shoot itself that she's in charge. And so that changes the narrative, right?
Yeah.
So now all of a sudden, you start talking to women and you're courting them about coming over to use your service. Well, if nobody else is marketing to a high net worth woman, and all of a sudden she's looking at our material and she can see herself in there, who's got the competitive advantage? We do. And all it was a photo shoot, right?
Yeah.
Now we've got to do all the work in behind the scenes to make sure that, everything works correctly. But we did that for every single group. And it was powerful, because now people could see themselves. This is something so simple, but they could see themselves in the material. And then the message we were sending is everybody's welcome on board our air. So
And did you see the change? Did you see the results?
We saw the change, and within 18 months, we had a 230 some odd percentage, increase in revenue, and those are hard dollars, right?
Yeah.
Just revenue for women or people of color, and so we were intentional, but also it was just a good business decision as well. And so we changed the narrative, but we also changed the business, which was great.
And I love that too, because it's when you sit down and say, how do I change something as big and nebulous, almost as that, it starts with just freaking something. Just do, like my husband always say, do something, even if it's wrong, right? Like,
That's right.
It's so simple. I love that.
Yeah.
Before I ask the last question, you have obviously your book, Ally Leadership, How to Lead People Who Are Not Like You. You also have a newsletter, I believe. Where do you want people to interact with you and come find your wonderfulness?
Thank you for asking that. So you can buy the book anywhere books are sold. And I'm super proud of the work, because it's not a DEI book. It's a book for all leaders. We've got 6 generations out there working. We have women as the majority of the world's population. We have every ethnic group growing, non-ethnic groups shrinking. We have people with neurodiversities, people with different able body folks. We have the LGBTQ plus community. We have a lot going on in today's modern workforce. And we have all the different generations at which, boomers think differently than Zoomers and so on and so forth. So every leader is going to be leading people who are not like them. We don't have to have a discussion about whether if you can pull any research you want from McKinsey, Deloitte, Harvard Business Review, anything. We don't need to have the discussion about whether diverse teams, how they perform. They simply outperform
Period.
teams that are not diverse.
Full
Right. So
stop.
that
End of
discussion's
story.
over. Exactly. And so what now we really have to talk about is, which is something we don't usually talk about,
Mhm.
which is when you've got so many people that are so different, sometimes that is hard to actually lead, right?
Yep.
And my book really is all about, here's how you do it, because I've
Okay.
had to do it. And so, and so was able to get to the highest level. So here's some tools that hopefully will make it really simple for you as well. That's what this book is all about. So it is, if you're a leader today or you want to become a leader, you're going to have to know, I would say, you're going to have to know how to lead all God's children, every race, every creed, every gender. That's the job. And so that's what this book is really designed to do, is to help it a little bit, make it easier for leaders. So you can catch me at stephaniechung.com, or you can catch me on any social at, my call sign is at the Stephanie Chung. And of course, you have the newsletter that you were talking about. My newsletter / podcast is really designed for those people who want to get into the C-suite, or they're a woman working in a male-dominated industry, so they want some help there, or they're a salesperson who's really good, but they want to be number one. Those are the 3 target areas for the newsletter, and you can find that on Substack at yourallyinleadership.com.
Love it. All right. Last question.
Yes, ma'am.
What is your last tip for people to make work suck less?
Ooh, that's a good one. I would say use your voice. See, I'm tired of having the conversation, because I speak on the speaking circuit, and this is something that comes up all the time, right? How do I use my voice? And a lot of times women will be the ones that usually will ask that question. What I want everyone to realize is this: you don't have a choice. Stop asking the question. The question is not, how do I use my voice? The question needs to be, I'm using my voice. So what would you recommend I use it towards, right? But it's not like, how do I use it? It's just, you have to use it. And
Yeah.
what tends to happen is people think, when I get to the C-suite, then everybody's going to listen to me. Nope. Yeah, bigger level, bigger devil, right? So you've got to grow where you're planted now. And it could be scary. It may feel uncomfortable. You may have all kind of fear floating around in your head, but it all starts with the first step. And every single one of us had that fear floating around in our head. But the difference between those that made it and those that don't is we just felt the fear and did it anyway, right?
Yeah.
And so really what I want for your listeners to really grab hold of is, this thing doesn't get any easier. So if you're waiting for a time that it's going to be easier, it's not going to happen, right? So you have to make stuff happen. That's how leadership. I shouldn't say that's how leadership works. That's how the game is played. Let's just be honest, right?
Yeah.
You have to be able to produce a result, but that's the minimum entry level. And now you've got to be able to stand out from all the noise. And how you stand out from the noise is being able to speak things that will add value to the conversation.
Right.
That's it. And so that doesn't happen by, you can't read your mind. You're going to have to say things. And it's okay if you make mistakes on the front end. That's how you learn, right?
Yeah.
But the goal is just to take that step and then take the next step. And that makes it easier. I was just sharing this with somebody the other day. And I talked about this in the book, the secret to winning is winning. Like, that's the secret. It's called the winning effect. Exactly. So, and there's real science behind it, which I go into the book, because once you win, there's a feeling that your brain actually loves that chemical feeling, and how the adrenaline and just, all the positive chemicals that get produced from winning. And then it works to try to kind of duplicate that feeling again. So the secret to winning is winning. And how you win is, you first have to figure out what winning means to you. How are you winnable? And then you use your voice towards that direction. So,
yeah. And if you don't, what else fun is it, right? Because at the end, my last episode was about leaving a legacy, and at the end of the day, do you really want to just collect a paycheck, or do you want to leave a legacy? And I am certain that you have left and are going to continue to leave a legacy, Miss Chung, Miss Stephanie Chung. This has been amazing. I'm so glad that you came into our lives, and we appreciate you sharing all your stories, your wisdom with all of us.
Thank you so much for having me. This was fun. I had such a good time. So thank you very much. You did a good job making me tell stories that I normally don't tell. So thank you.
And my final note is, as she was talking, I realized that I'm kind of I call myself like a story whore, but one of the stories from my corporate time that I have not put in either of my books yet and not told that is one of my funniest freaking moments as an executive was the one time I was on the corporate jet. And it's a hilarious story. And I'll just tell the listeners tune in. That's coming to an episode.
Yeah. Once you've gone on a corporate jet, it's really hard to it's very addictive, isn't it?
But I only went once and it was worth it just for the story.
Hey, it's Erin with a teeny request. If you have ever gotten any value from this podcast and you'd like us to stick around, plus you want it to continue to grow so we can kind of swindle bigger and more knowledgeable guests to join us and to keep providing you with tangible and inspiring actions you can take to achieve the career and life you deserve, could you please just take 1 minute to leave us a rating and a review? Those reviews go a long way in attracting guests to the show, and candidly, they really make Nicole and I's day. We see you. We really do. So when you have the time and inspiration, we'd love to see a rating and review from you. Thank you.